Welcome to the Friday Night Campfire Stories. My name is Rob and I will be your host for this evening. If you're new here, every single Friday I share a chapter from one of my original stories with you guys. For the past 6 weeks, we have been reading through my story Astral, which has been my sci-fi thriller story. It has been quite a journey so far, especially last week, which ignited an entire war that we will get into more this week. We're going to be diving more into the reasoning for what happened last week and more into the backstory of Talon. So if you have not watched chapters 1 through 6 yet, I highly recommend doing that because none of this will really make sense. Especially last week. Last week's episode was very key to the story, but this one's also very important. So, like I said, if you haven't watched it, check out the Astral playlist before checking out this video. But if you are all caught up, then you're ready to go, and I know you guys don't want to wait another second. So, without further ado, this is Chapter 7 of my story, Astral.
The air in the sanctum was heavy, the silence suffocating. The flickering orbs overhead dimmed, their glow fading as though the life had been drained from the room itself. Callum couldn't move. His eyes were fixed on Eldrin's lifeless body sprawled across the cold obsidian floor. The man who had been a pillar of wisdom and strength, who had shown Callum a glimpse of his potential and given him a sense of belonging, now lay motionless, his silver hair fanned out like a halo. The staff that Eldrin had wielded with such grace rolled a few feet away, its glow extinguished. It looked broken, like its master. Callum's chest tightened, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, threatening to crush him. "No." The word escaped his lips as a whisper, barely audible. He took a hesitant step forward, his legs trembling beneath him. The enormity of what had just happened was too much to process. Eldrin, the leader of the society, the man who had seen something special in Callum, was gone. Callum knelt beside Eldrin, his hands hovering uselessly over the older man's still form. He wanted to shake him, to will him back to life, but he couldn't bring himself to touch him. The finality of it was too much to bear. "Why?" he whispered, his voice cracking. The question wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but it hung in the air like a lead weight. Callum's vision blurred with tears, and he swiped at his face, trying to hold himself together. Eldrin had been more than just a teacher. In the brief time Callum had known him, he had become a beacon of hope, a reminder that Callum's abilities were more than just strange dreams or random gifts. Eldrin had made him believe that he could be part of something greater, that he could make a difference in the world. And now he was gone. Callum's shoulders shook as a sob escaped him. He didn't care who saw. The grief was too raw, too overwhelming to hide. The silence was broken by the sound of Talon's voice, cold and unfeeling. "Pathetic," he said, his words cutting through the air like a knife. "You mourn a man who kept you chained, who denied you the truth of what you're capable of." Callum didn't look up. He couldn't. "He was weak," Talon continued, his tone growing sharper. "He chose ignorance over power. He kept you all in the dark because he was afraid of what you might become." Callum clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. The words stung, but his grief outweighed his anger. "He gave me purpose," Callum said quietly, his voice trembling. "He believed in me when no one else did." Talon scoffed. "He used you, just like he used all of us, but no more." Callum finally looked up, his tear-streaked face meeting the glowing red slashes of Talon's mask. There was no hatred in his eyes, only a profound sadness that seemed to pierce through Talon's bravado. "You'll never understand what he stood for," Callum said, his voice steadier now. "And that's why you'll never be what he was." For a moment, Talon said nothing. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, but Callum didn't flinch. Then, without warning, Talon stepped closer, his presence looming over Callum like a shadow. His glowing red eyes bore down on him through the mask, and before Callum could react, Talon grabbed him by the arm and yanked him to his feet. "Enough," Talon said, his voice low and sharp. "You've had your moment. Now we leave." Callum tried to pull away, his voice trembling with anger and grief. "I'm not going anywhere. Eldrin deserves more than this. Talon's grip tightened, cutting him off. "Eldrin is dead," he said coldly. "This place, his legacy, is dead. Clinging to it won't change that." Callum's chest heaved with emotion, but Talon didn't relent. He gestured sharply toward the others, who began moving toward the exit with eerie precision. "We're done here," Talon said, his tone final. "Move." Callum dug his heels in, his fists clenched at his sides. "I'm not leaving him." "You don't have a choice," Talon snapped. In one swift motion, he pulled Callum toward him and propelled them both into the air. The flight was disorienting, the wind whipping past Callum's face as Talon carried him out of the sanctum. Callum's heart pounded, his mind racing with the events of the night. Eldrin's lifeless body, the devastation in the chamber, and now this, being dragged away against his will. Talon's grip was unyielding, his dark cloak billowing behind him as they soared through the night. The other members followed in formation, their movements swift and synchronized like shadows gliding through the sky. They landed on the roof of a nearby building, its flat surface bathed in faint moonlight. Callum stumbled as his feet hit the ground, his knees threatening to give out beneath him. "What are you doing?" Callum demanded, his voice raw with emotion. Talon ignored him, his focus on the sanctum in the distance. The ancient structure stood silently against the night sky, its glowing orbs barely visible from where they stood. Talon raised his hand, his voice carrying an edge of cruel satisfaction. "Light it up." The command hung in the air for a heartbeat before the other members responded. Together, they raised their hands, their combined energy creating a pulsating sphere of dark light. The energy crackled, radiating with raw power, and then, in unison, they hurled it toward the sanctum. Callum's eyes widened in horror. "No! Stop!" The sphere struck the sanctum, and for a moment everything was still. Then, with a deafening roar, the ancient structure exploded. The ground beneath them trembled as a shockwave rippled outward, shaking the nearby buildings. Flames erupted from the ruins, consuming what little remained of the sanctum. The glowing orbs that had once illuminated the chamber winked out, one by one, their light extinguished forever. Callum staggered backward, his breath caught in his throat, as he watched the destruction unfold. Talon stood at the edge of the rooftop, his mask gleaming in the firelight. "The sanctum was a relic of the past," he said, his voice calm but resolute, "a symbol of Eldrin's failure. It's time for a new beginning." Callum's fists clenched, his nails digging into his palms. His grief burned into anger, but he held his tongue, knowing that now wasn't the time to act. He turned his gaze back to the flames, the loss of Eldrin and the sanctum settling heavily on his chest. The sanctum was gone, and with it, the only place Callum had begun to feel at home. Callum's heart was pounding as he stared at the blazing remains of the sanctum. The flames reflected in his eyes, their flickering light contrasting sharply with the oppressive darkness of the night. His fists remained clenched, his mind a whirlwind of emotions, grief, anger, confusion. Behind him, Talon turned, his cloak sweeping across the rooftop as he faced Callum. The glowing red eyes of his mask bore into Callum with an intensity that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. "You've seen what I'm capable of," Talon said, his voice smooth and calculated. "What we're capable of. That's only the beginning, Callum." Callum didn't respond. His jaw tightened, and he forced himself to meet Talon's gaze despite the unease crawling up his spine. Talon stepped closer, his tone softening, almost coaxing. "You don't have to fight this, Callum. You're different. You have power, potential, more than Eldrin ever understood. You felt it, didn't you? The shackles he kept on us, the limits he imposed out of his own fear. Callum shook his head, his voice low but firm. Eldrin didn't hold us back. He protected us. Protected you from what? Talon countered sharply. From the truth? From what you're meant to be? Eldrin was a coward, Callum. He was afraid of what we could accomplish, what you could accomplish. He saw your potential, but he would have kept you in chains, just like the rest of us. Callum's chest tightened as Talon's words sank in. There was something undeniably persuasive about them, an allure that tugged at the edges of his doubt. You think I didn't feel what you felt? Talon continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. That burning need to understand, to push further, to see what lies beyond the surface? That's what drove me, and now I can offer you the same freedom. Talon extended a gloved hand toward Callum. Join me, join the Abyssal Dominion. Together we'll uncover the true power of astral projection. No limits, no restrictions, only possibility. With your gifts and my vision, we could reshape the world. Callum took a step back, his throat dry. He could feel the weight of the other members' eyes on him, their silent presence a reminder of how far Talon's influence had already spread. What you're doing isn't freedom, Callum said, his voice trembling but steady. It's destruction. You've turned your back on everything the society stood for. The society is dead, Talon snapped, his calm demeanor slipping. You saw it fall tonight. What I'm offering is something greater, something real. Don't waste this opportunity, Callum. You've already proven you're not like the others. Callum straightened, forcing himself to hold Talon's gaze. You're right. I'm not like the others. His voice grew stronger. I'm not like you. A flicker of frustration crossed Talon's masked face. Don't be a fool, he said coldly. This world will change with or without you. Choose wisely, Callum. The Abyssal Dominion has no room for weakness. Callum's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. I'm not joining you. Before Talon could respond, a rush of wind swept across the rooftop. Callum turned, his breath catching in his throat as a familiar figure descended gracefully from the night sky. Vexa. Her midnight black hair flowed behind her like a veil, and her emerald eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. She landed lightly on the rooftop, her boots clicking softly against the concrete as she straightened. What's going on? She asked, her voice carrying a mix of concern and confusion. Her gaze flicked from Talon to Callum and then to the burning remnants of the sanctum in the distance. I felt the shockwave. What happened? Callum opened his mouth to answer, but Talon spoke first, his voice calm and deliberate. Eldrin is dead, he said simply. The sanctum is gone. The society is no more. Vexa's emerald eyes widened, her lips parting in a sharp intake of breath. For a moment, she looked genuinely frightened, her gaze darting to Callum as though searching for confirmation. Dead? She whispered. You killed him? Talon nodded slowly, his red eyes gleaming through the mask. It was necessary. He clung to the past, to weakness. It was time to move forward. Vexa hesitated, her expression shifting as though she were struggling to process the gravity of the moment. Then, slowly, she took a step closer to Talon. So, she said softly, her voice steadying, we're actually going through with this. Callum froze, the words hitting him like a blow to the chest. What? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Vexa turned to him, her expression unreadable. For a moment there was silence, the crackle of distant flames the only sound. You knew, Callum said, his voice trembling. You knew this was going to happen. Vexa's lips curved into a faint smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't know it would be tonight, she said, stepping closer to Callum. But yes, I knew. Talon and we've been planning this for a long time. Callum stumbled back, shaking his head in disbelief. You were with him? You betrayed Eldrin? Betrayed? Vexa repeated, tilting her head. No, Callum, I chose the future. Her voice softened, and she took another step toward him, her emerald eyes locking onto his. Eldrin was a good man, but he was blind. He kept us shackled, afraid of what we could become. Talon sees the truth. He sees what's possible if we embrace our full potential. Callum's heart pounded as he tried to process her words. Eldrin gave you everything, he said, his voice rising. He trusted you. Vexa's expression shifted, a flicker of something unspoken crossing her face before she forced a smile. He gave me a cage, Callum. Talon is offering me wings. She reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against his arm. And he's offering them to you too. Callum flinched at her touch, his thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. You're trying to manipulate me, he said, his voice unsteady. Why? Vexa's lips curled into a sly smile. Because I see something in you, Callum. Something none of the others have. You're different. Special. Eldrin saw it too, didn't he? She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. But he would have kept you in his shadow, just like he did with the rest of us. With Talon, you'd be free. You could be great. Callum's breath caught as her emerald eyes bore into his. Her presence was magnetic, her words laced with a dangerous allure. I don't want greatness, he said, his voice shaking. I want to do what's right. Vexa sighed, her hand trailing down his arm as she stepped back. Right, she repeated, her tone almost mocking. Right by whose standards, Callum? Eldrin's? The man who kept you in the dark about the truth of our abilities? Callum's fists clenched. Eldrin didn't want power for himself. He wanted to protect us. Protect you. Vexa's eyes narrowed, her expression hardening. Protect us from what? Ourselves? That's not protection, it's control. Eldrin feared what we could become, but I don't. I see the potential in all of us, Callum, and I see it in you. Her voice softened again, and she leaned in, her gaze searching his. Come with us. You don't belong in the shadows. You belong with me. Callum's chest tightened, the conflict raging within him. For a moment, he was speechless, caught between the gravity of her words and the pain of her betrayal. I can't, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Vexa's smile faltered, but only for a second. She straightened, her emerald eyes glinting with something unreadable. You will, she said, her tone cool but certain. You just don't realize it yet. Callum shook his head, his voice firm despite the fear tightening his chest. I'll never join you. Talon's posture stiffened, the faint air of amusement around him vanishing in an instant. Never is a dangerous word, Callum, he said, his voice cold and sharp. Eldrin said never, and look where he is now. Callum swallowed hard, but he didn't back down. You can threaten me all you want, but I'll never stand with you. Talon's glowing red eyes narrowed, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. Then, you've made your choice. With a flick of his hand, Talon conjured shimmering black ropes that shot toward Callum like vipers. They coiled around his arms and legs, binding him in place. The ropes pulsed with dark energy, their grip unyielding as Callum struggled against them. Talon, stop this! Callum shouted, his voice strained as he fought against the bonds. But Talon didn't listen. He raised one hand, and a ball of fire began to form above his palm, its core burning a deep crimson. The flames crackled ominously, casting flickering shadows across Talon's dark armor. Join us, Talon said, his voice low and deadly, or meet the same end as your beloved Eldrin. Callum's heart raced, his mind screaming for a way out. But no matter how hard he struggled, the ropes held firm. The fireball grew larger, its heat searing against his skin even from a distance. "I won't do it," Callum said, his voice trembling but resolute. "I'll never join you." Talon's mask tilted slightly, as if he were studying Callum's resolve. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he raised the fireball higher, its flames roaring to life. Callum clenched his fists, his breathing shallow as the heat of the fireball pressed closer. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing himself for the inevitable. "This is it," he thought. But instead of pain, there was silence. Callum's eyes fluttered open, and he blinked in confusion. The ropes, the fire, the rooftop, they were gone. He was lying in his bed, the faint morning light streaming through his window. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stared at the ceiling, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, he couldn't move, the memories of the confrontation with Talon still fresh in his mind. He was alive.
So that is going to do it for today. I hope that you guys did enjoy. I know Astral's been a longer series than what we're used to here on the channel. Usually my stories are 4 chapters long. This one is a full 8 chapters long, but we are reaching the finish line here as we are getting into the finale of Astral next week, and it's one that you're not going to want to miss. So be sure to click that like button and hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you stay notified. It will be coming out next week, will be the grand finale of what has been an incredible story, and it's only really getting started, as crazy as that sounds. If you're new here, I do make 3 videos every single week. Every Monday I do an episode of Echoes of the Past, which is my paranormal hauntings and history series. Every Wednesday I do an episode of Far From Fiction, which is my true crime series. And then of course Friday Night Campfire Story, the namesake of the channel. So if any of that interests you, the creepy, the dark, the spooky, the eerie vibes, then you found the right channel for you. Be sure to click that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you guys next time. And as always, thank you for spending a little bit of your evening here with me.